Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shibowale. Network Africa begins in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 19 people have been killed overnight by suspected Islamist militants in the eastern region of the country. Local officials say this is seen as a step up on attacks on civilians in response to a military campaign against them in border areas with Uganda. The assailants, who the officials say belong to the Allied Democratic Forces, that's the ADF, a Ugandan Islamist group, also kidnapped several people and torched a Catholic church during two separate attacks. The Congolese army began an offensive 3 weeks ago near the Ugandan border. The ADF has been operating there for more than 2 decades and is one of dozens of rebel groups active in the mineral-rich areas where civil wars resulted in millions of deaths around the turn of the century. Meanwhile, Islamic State's West African affiliates claimed responsibility for an attack on an army patrol in northern Mali that killed 30 soldiers. That's according to a statement published by the Site Intelligence Group, an American company that tracks online activity of white supremacist and jihadist organizations. The army says dozens of other soldiers were wounded in the ambush that happened on Monday in Tabancourt in Mali's Gao region. The attack is the third major strike against Malian forces in the last 2 months by jihadist groups. The militants are mounting increasingly sophisticated operations across the Sahel region, a narrow band of scrubland below the Sahara. Islamic State claimed responsibility for an attack on an army post in early November that killed at least 53 soldiers, while an Al-Qaeda affiliate said it carried out coordinated raids in late September that killed 38 soldiers. In response to these attacks in the Sahel, the Assistant Secretary General for UN Peacekeeping Operations, Bintou Keita, says the situation in the Sahel is of serious concern. Speaking to the UN Security Council, she called on the G5 Sahel countries to overcome the challenges they face in putting the Joint Task Force to use. Fatima Kiari Mohamed, who is the permanent observer of the African Union to the United Nations, highlights the importance of winning the fight against terrorism.
The situation in the Sahel is of serious concern and urgent action is needed. It is therefore encouraging that the G5 Sahel Joint Force has increased its operational tempo. I welcome the commitments and determination of the G5 Sahel countries to overcome the many challenges they face in operationalizing the joint force.
The support of the countries in the region, the African Union, the United Nations, and the entire international community is an absolute priority to win the fight against terrorism in the region. As rightly emphasized by the Secretary General in his report, and I quote, "Terrorism is a global issue, and the entire international community has a responsibility to contribute to its defeat."
To politics now, a former South African state security minister has appeared in court on allegations of corruption. Bongani Bongo, who was seen as close to former President Jacob Zuma, is accused of offering money to a lawyer, given evidence at a parliamentary inquiry into corruption at the state power company Eskom in 2017. Mr. Bongo did not enter a plea. He was released on bail and is due back in court in January. Mr. Zuma appointed him state security minister 2 weeks after the alleged bribery took place. He lasted only 4 months in the job. Let's get more on this from our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia. Betty, what does this corruption charges mean for the former minister?
Of course, these charges don't mean well or don't mean good for the records or reputation of the former minister, Bongani Bongo, who incidentally is still a senior member of parliament under the ANC. But this has to do with an event that allegedly took place in 2017, in October 2017, where he allegedly tried to bribe an evidence leader, an advocate, during a probe, involved in a probe into state capture, or the issue, in this case, the state-run electricity company, Eskom, Eskom's affairs. So when this happened, this was brought to light. The then Speaker of Parliament, Madam Baleka Mbete, took the case or referred the case to the Ethics Committee of Parliament. So this has come to light. He was arrested by the Hawks. He's appeared in court, a magistrate court in Cape Town, and has been granted a 5,000 bill. So far, he hasn't said anything. He's refused to say anything. We don't know where this will go, but the case has been adjourned to somewhere in January 2020. We know that the opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, laid criminal charges against the former minister in terms of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. This happened in November 2017, just about a month after the incident was uncovered or was said to have happened. Was said to have happened in October 2017. So the various political parties have reacted, including the opposition parties.
Well, Mr. Bongo is seen as a close ally to former President Jacob Zuma. In fact, Mr. Zuma appointed Bongo's State Security Minister 2 weeks after the alleged bribery. Now, has there been any reaction from Zuma at all?
Well, the former minister is a close ally of the former president, and it's said that he is a close ally of the Guptas, who are in the bad books of the country at the moment. There has been so far no reaction from the former president, but we know that briefly when he was a minister, not up to a year, he was appointed the Minister of Intelligence in the last reshuffle of the former president. So far, former President Zuma hasn't said anything in this regard.
And I assume this is all part of the state capture inquiry. How are South Africans responding to this latest development?
It's indeed part of the state capture inquiry. There's still more arrests, and people are. There isn't really much of a surprise for the people. It's just that the surprise there is that the net is being cast wider. There's no surprise regarding former Minister Bongani Bongo, because we've had issues with his name attached to it, where he was a legal advisor in a province, I think in Mpumalanga province, over issues regarding land transactions, and that wasn't a good story regarding him. So the general arrest, apart from him, there are other arrests by the Hawks regarding corruption issues, investigations, and people are dismayed that the economy is going down, and there are these stories of very widespread corruption eating into the coffers of the state. And apart from being disappointed, they're not exactly surprised, because they just want to see that people are brought to book.
Yeah, Mr. Bongo isn't due to appear in court till January. If he's found guilty, what consequences is he likely to face?
The act which I mentioned earlier, covering corruption, is quite broad, depending on which court finds him guilty at the end of the day. But there are varying penalties to pay, ranging from a fine to 5 years to a sentence not exceeding 18 years. Or it depends on the enormity. In this case, he had offered the evidence leader a blank check to call in sick on the day that he's supposed to give evidence. So it depends at the end of the day. But by the 31st of January 2020, we'll get to hear the next moves at the court. That's when he's appearing next. But his bail conditions are quite strict. He's not supposed to travel just like that. He's supposed to give 2 weeks notice before he travels, among other things. And he's been warned not to interfere with any evidence or any witness in the investigations going on.
All right, then, Betty, thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa.